You cannot escape this! I will break free!
The rope burned against Bruce Lee's wrists as 4 gang members shoved him against the cold warehouse wall. His hands were tied behind his back, his feet bound together. The leader, a massive man named Chun with a scar running down his left cheek, laughed loudly while cracking his knuckles. "The great Bruce Lee," Chun mocked, spitting on the concrete floor. "Hollywood's kung fu hero. Let's see how tough you are when you can't move." The other 3 gang members, Tommy, Wei, and Dragon, circled around Bruce like hungry wolves. They'd been planning this for weeks. Bruce had refused to pay protection money for his new martial arts school in San Francisco's Chinatown. Now they wanted to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. But what they didn't know was that Bruce Lee's greatest weapon wasn't his fists. It was his mind. In just 47 seconds, these 4 criminals would learn the most painful lesson of their lives. A lesson about respect, real strength, and why you should never, ever underestimate someone who's spent their entire life mastering the art of combat. Before we continue, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss stories of justice being served. Now let's see what happened next. The background. 3 months earlier, Bruce Lee had returned to San Francisco after filming Enter the Dragon in Hong Kong. At 32 years old, he was at the peak of his physical abilities. His martial arts philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, had revolutionized fighting techniques across the world. But Bruce wasn't just a fighter. He was a teacher who believed in discipline, honor, and protecting the weak. He'd opened the Junfan Kung Fu Institute on Grant Avenue, right in the heart of Chinatown. The neighborhood was beautiful but dangerous. Local gangs controlled most businesses through fear and extortion. Every shop owner paid protection money to avoid having their windows smashed or their families threatened. Bruce knew about the gangs. His own childhood in Hong Kong had been surrounded by street fighters and criminals. He'd seen good people broken by bullies who used fear as a weapon. That's exactly why he refused to pay when Chen's gang came to collect. The confrontation builds. "Mr. Lee," Chen had said during their first meeting at the school, his voice smooth but threatening. "This is a dangerous neighborhood. Accidents happen. Your students might get hurt walking home at night. Your beautiful school might catch fire. Unless, of course, you have proper protection." Bruce had looked at Chun with calm, steady eyes. "I don't need protection from criminals, and I don't pay bribes." Chen's face had turned red with anger. Nobody refused him. Not the restaurants, not the shops, not the other martial arts schools. Who did this movie star think he was? "You're making a big mistake, Lee. A very big mistake." But Bruce didn't back down. He continued teaching his students, helping them learn not just fighting techniques, but confidence and self-respect. Older adults, young teenagers, even some women who wanted to learn self-defense, Bruce welcomed everyone. This made Chen even angrier. In his twisted mind, Bruce was showing disrespect, making him look weak in front of other gang members. The protection racket was about fear, and Bruce Lee showed no fear at all. The trap. Chen spent 2 weeks watching Bruce's daily routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, Bruce stayed late at the school to practice alone. He'd lock the front door, turn off most of the lights, and spend 2 hours perfecting his techniques in the large training room. "That's when we grab him," Chen told his crew. "No students around, no witnesses. We tie him up, beat him until he begs, and make him understand how things work in this neighborhood." On Thursday night, October 12th, they made their move. Bruce was practicing his famous 1-inch punch, a devastating technique that generated enormous power for minimal distance, when he heard the back door crash open. 4 men rushed in. Bruce immediately recognized Chen and knew exactly what was happening. He moved into fighting stance, but Chen pulled out a knife. "Don't be stupid, Lee. There's 4 of us and 1 of you. We just want to talk." "Then talk," Bruce said calmly, not moving from his position. But Chen had no intention of talking. He nodded to Dragon, who threw a handful of sand directly into Bruce's eyes. In that blinding moment, all 4 men jumped on him. Despite being temporarily blinded, Bruce managed to throw off 2 of them with powerful strikes. But Tommy wrapped a thick rope around his arms while Wei tackled his legs. Within seconds, they had him bound, wrists tied behind his back, ankles wrapped together with professional knots that Chun had learned during his years in prison. The mockery begins. They dragged Bruce to the corner of the training room and propped him against the wall. His vision was slowly clearing from the sand, revealing 4 sneering faces staring down at him. "Not so tough now, are you?" Tommy laughed, shoving Bruce's shoulder. "Where are your fancy kicks? Your movie star moves." Chin knelt down, grabbing Bruce's face roughly. "Here's how this works, Lee. You're going to pay us $500 every month, and you're going to tell every business owner in Chinatown that Chen's gang provides the best protection. You understand?" Bruce said nothing. His expression remained completely calm, almost peaceful. This only made Chen angrier. "You think you're better than us?" Chen shouted, standing up and kicking dust near Bruce's legs. "You make kung fu movies and think you're some kind of hero. You're nothing. Just another immigrant trying to survive in America like the rest of us." Wei stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Let me hit him a few times. Teach him some respect." "Not yet," Chen said, pulling out a cigarette. "First, I want him to beg. I want him to apologize for disrespecting me. Then we'll discuss how much pain he deserves." Bruce's silence and inner calm. Throughout all this, Bruce remained completely silent. His breathing was slow and controlled, the deep, rhythmic breathing he'd practiced for years through meditation. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't afraid. He was calculating. The ropes around his wrists were thick, but standard, tied with a square knot, strong but predictable. His ankles were bound together, limiting his leg movement, but not eliminating it completely. The gang had made their first mistake. They tied his hands behind his back but left several inches of space between his wrists and his lower back. More importantly, they'd underestimated what the human body could do when controlled by a master of martial arts. Bruce had spent 20 years studying not just fighting, but human anatomy, physics, and the mechanical principles of movement. He understood leverage points, pressure points, and how to generate enormous force from seemingly impossible positions. Being tied up was a challenge, yes, but it wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. The psychological warfare. Chun walked closer, blowing cigarette smoke in Bruce's face. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. I think underneath all that tough guy act, you're just another coward who talks big but can't back it up." Dragon joined in. "My cousin said he saw you filming in Hong Kong. Said the stuntmen were doing all the real fighting. You just pose for the camera." This was a deliberate strategy. Chen had learned that breaking someone's spirit was often more effective than breaking their body. Make them doubt themselves. Make them feel helpless. Then they'd never resist again. But Chen had no idea who he was dealing with. Bruce Lee had faced racist attacks in America since he was 18 years old. He'd fought traditional martial arts masters who said his techniques were worthless. He'd been told by Hollywood executives that an Asian man could never be a leading star. Every single day of his life was a struggle against people who tried to make him feel inferior. These 4 thugs thought a few insults would break his spirit. They had no idea what real strength looked like. The first sign of change. After 15 minutes of mockery and threats, Wei got impatient. "This is boring. Let me just punch him a few times." "Fine," Chen said, stepping back. "But don't damage his face too much. He needs to go back to his school and tell everyone what happens when you disrespect us." Wei approached with a cruel smile, pulling his fist back for a hard punch to Bruce's stomach. This was the moment everything changed. As Wei's punch came forward, Bruce did something that seemed impossible. Despite his hands being tied behind his back and his feet bound together, he suddenly shifted his entire body weight, using the wall behind him as leverage. His legs, though tied at the ankles, shot upward with explosive power, the same leg strength he developed through years of training. The kick caught Wei directly under the chin with the force of a car crash. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Wei's head snapped back violently. His eyes rolled up, showing only white. He collapsed backward onto the concrete floor, completely unconscious. Blood dripped from his mouth, where he'd bitten through his own tongue. The room went silent except for Wei's body, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Shock and realization. "Chun, Tommy," and Dragon stared at Wei's unconscious body in complete shock. That kick, from a man with his hands tied and feet bound, had been faster and more powerful than anything they'd ever seen. Wei was the strongest fighter in their crew. Now he was unconscious on the floor, bleeding. What the hell? Tommy whispered, backing away slightly. Bruce's calm expression hadn't changed at all. If anything, there was a slight smile on his face. I warned you, he said quietly. I don't need protection from criminals. Chen's shock turned to rage. You're going to pay for that. Get him. But now there was hesitation. Tommy and Dragon looked at each other nervously. They just watched their friend get knocked out by someone whose hands and feet were tied. What would happen if Bruce got free? Chen grabbed Tommy's shoulder. I said get him. There's 3 of us, and he's still tied up. Tommy moved forward cautiously, trying to grab Bruce's shoulders to pin him more firmly against the wall. Another mistake. The counterattack. Bruce had been subtly working on the ropes around his wrists since the moment they tied him up. While Chun was busy talking and making threats, Bruce had been slowly twisting his wrists, creating tiny amounts of slack. The technique was something he'd learned from studying Chinese escape artists. The human wrist can compress significantly if you know how to position the bones correctly. As Tommy reached for him, Bruce suddenly brought his hands around from behind his back. The ropes were still on his wrists, but his hands were now in front of his body. In that split second of Tommy's shock, Bruce's fingers, still bound together, shot forward like a spear directly into Tommy's throat. The strike hit Tommy's trachea with surgical precision. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to send him gasping to his knees, unable to breathe properly. He clutched his throat, making choking sounds, his eyes wide with panic. Dragon pulled out a knife, his hand shaking. Stay back. I'll cut you. Bruce remained sitting against the wall, his bound hands now in front of him, his feet still tied together. But something had changed in his eyes. The calm, peaceful expression was gone. Now there was something harder. Something dangerous. Put the knife down, Bruce said quietly. You don't want to make this worse. The final lesson. Chen's face was red with rage and embarrassment. His carefully planned kidnapping had turned into a disaster. 2 of his men were down. His reputation was being destroyed by a man who was still technically their prisoner. He grabbed Dragon's knife. Forget teaching him a lesson. We're going to kill him. Make it look like a robbery. No one will ever know. But as Chen stepped forward with a knife, Bruce did something extraordinary. He used a technique called the kip-up, a move where someone flat on their back can spring directly to their feet using explosive core strength. Except Bruce modified it. With his feet still bound, he used his back against the wall as a launching pad. His body shot upward vertically like a rocket. The ropes around his ankles limited his stance, but years of balance training meant he could stand on tied feet as easily as most people stand normally. In one fluid motion as he rose, his bound hands grabbed the knife from Chen's shocked grip. The knife clattered across the floor. Chen stumbled backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. How was this possible? How was someone with tied hands and feet now standing, now dangerous, now completely in control? Leave, Bruce said, his voice deadly calm. Take your friends and leave. Don't ever come back to my school. Don't ever threaten my students. And tell every gang in Chinatown that protection money doesn't work on people who refuse to be victims. Dragon helped Wei and Tommy to their feet. Both men were barely conscious, groaning in pain. Dragon's hands were shaking as he supported Wei's weight. Chun stood frozen, his pride battling against the obvious reality that he'd lost. Finally, survival instinct won over ego. This isn't over, Lee, he said, trying to maintain some dignity. But his voice shook with fear. Yes, Bruce said, reaching down to untie his ankles with his bound hands. It is. The aftermath. The 4 gang members limped out of the school, leaving behind only the knife and their shattered confidence. Wei would need surgery on his broken jaw. Tommy couldn't speak above a whisper for 3 weeks. Dragon and Chun would carry the psychological scars much longer than any physical injuries. Bruce finally removed the ropes from his wrists, rubbing the raw skin where they'd burned during his escape. The whole encounter had lasted less than 20 minutes, but it would become legendary in San Francisco's Chinatown. The next morning, the story spread like wildfire. Chen's gang, feared by every business on Grant Avenue, had been defeated by one man who'd been tied up. The details grew with each retelling. Some said Bruce had knocked out all 4 men. Some said he'd done it blindfolded. Some said he'd fought off 10 gang members. The truth was impressive enough, without exaggeration. The ripple effect. Other business owners, who'd been paying protection money, started refusing. When different gangs showed up to collect, people would say, "Bruce Lee doesn't pay you. Why should we?" The power structure that Chun had built through fear began crumbling. Bruce never bragged about what happened. When students asked him about it, he would say simply, "I did what was necessary to protect myself and others." That's what martial arts is truly for, not for showing off, but for standing up against injustice. But he did add one new lesson to his teaching curriculum. He called it overcoming limitations. He would have students practice techniques while sitting down, while lying on their backs, even while having their hands gently held behind them by partners. "You must learn to fight from any position," he'd explain, "because in real life, you won't always be standing in a perfect stance with perfect conditions. Your greatest weapon isn't your fists or your feet. It's your mind and your spirit. Those can never be tied up." The real lesson. 3 weeks later, Chin appeared at Bruce's school. Not with his gang, but alone. His face was bruised, not from Bruce, but from his own gang members who'd beaten him up for the humiliation he'd brought them. He'd been kicked out of the crew he'd once led. "I came to apologize," Chin said quietly, standing in the doorway, "and to ask if maybe you teach me. Real fighting, not just bullying and threatening people." Bruce looked at him for a long moment. He could see the genuine shame in Chen's eyes, the broken pride, the desperate need for a different path. "Come back tomorrow morning," Bruce said. 6 a.m. Be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And understand that martial arts isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. Chin showed up the next morning, and the morning after that, he would become one of Bruce's most dedicated students, eventually opening his own school teaching discipline and respect to at-risk youth in the community. The universal truth. The story of Bruce Lee being tied up and defeating his captors taught the people of San Francisco's Chinatown something important. True strength has nothing to do with physical power or weapons or fear. True strength comes from discipline, training, and refusing to accept being a victim. Years later, when Bruce Lee died tragically young at age 32, the people of Chinatown mourned not just a movie star, but a real hero who'd stood up for them when they were afraid to stand up for themselves. The martial arts school he'd opened remained a symbol of resistance against injustice. Students still practice there today, learning not just how to fight, but when to fight, and more importantly, what's worth fighting for. As Bruce himself once said, "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." That night in the warehouse, tied up and outnumbered, Bruce Lee applied everything he knew. And in doing so, he taught 4 criminals, and eventually an entire community, that real power comes not from dominance, but from discipline, courage, and the absolute refusal to be broken by fear. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice and courage. Have you ever stood up against a bully or witnessed someone show incredible courage in a difficult situation? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to find their own strength. Remember, like Bruce Lee taught us, you're stronger than you think, even when the odds seem impossible.